r/ask Reddit. Which misconception would you like to debunk? You can file a missing persons report as soon as the person goes missing. No need to wait 24 hours or whatever. It's actually a law, or is proposed, I can't remember, in my state that parents must report their child missing within 24 hours or they are charged with a felony. Casey Anthony said she was just seeing if her kid turned up again somehow, like a lost cat. The boiling frog experiment that's quoted everywhere didn't work. For those not familiar, it is said that you can boil a frog to death by raising the temperature of the water it's in extremely slowly so that it doesn't notice. Well, it only works when parts of the frog's brain are removed. A frog with an intact brain will jump out, no matter how slowly the water is heated. Edit. Hey, my first Reddit coin. Thanks. I don't remember who it was, but there was a comedian on some panel show who said that the first time his parents cooked a lobster, they thought it would be more humane to put the lobster in cold water and then bring it to a boil gradually. Cue about 10 minutes of a lobster going apeshit until finally dying plus emotional scarring for everyone involved. Edit. The comedian in question was apparently David Mitchell. Thanks folks. That's so strange. I think some people believe the myth that saltwater crustaceans can be killed more humanely by leaving them in cold fresh water to drown. And some people think you heat it slowly and kill it. For anyone wondering, the humane way to kill them is to chill them first and then stab them quickly. Edit. To the many vegetarians and vegans who feel moved to tell me that you believe killing animals for food is always inhumane. 20+ comments to this effect. I get it. While I don't share your views, I do respect them. If you're ever in a position where you think it is right to euthanize a suffering crustacean, you might still value the SPCA information above. I work as a ride operator at Disneyland, and please just let me say this. The purple teacup doesn't spin any faster than the rest of them. Please stop getting into fights over it. Edit. I would also like to say that people throwing up on that ride is actually not common at all. I have personally never seen it happen in my 3 years of working there. Edit 2. Thanks for the silver stranger. Ducking idiots. Everyone knows the green is fastest because green means go. Clearly the correct choice is red. Any true green knows red makes everything go faster. I was barred from participating in a school swimming race because I ate some chocolate beforehand and a teacher caught me. She said I would get a cramp and die and I had to wait 20 minutes. Even 8-year-old me knew it was complete twaddle. Your teacher had money on another kid. Eating fat doesn't make you fat. What really does it is eating more calories than what you use. The American war on fat started in the 80s. It was a huge mistake. 60s. Actually, it was between sugar and fats, and Big Sugar lobbied their way to make sure it was fat to take the blame. When you have an IV cannula inserted, a needle is used to insert the cannula, but then the needle is removed and you're left with a tiny thin plastic tube in the vein. I think 50% of my patients don't realize there's not a needle in their arm for hours, days on end. I wish the nurse would tell this after inserting the thing. I was 10ish when I first had to spend time in a hospital. The cannula hurt and I was certain I had a 5cm needle in my elbow pit and was terrified to bend my arm. Only a year ago, at age 25, I was told that there is no metal needle left in the arm. How am I supposed to realize if I am never told? And then on top of that we get to be made fun of for not knowing this obvious thing that really isn't that obvious to someone who doesn't have direct experience with it. This applies to all fields. Hey, I'm a pediatric nurse. I make sure to explain this to kids. I reckon it makes things easier for everyone. The McDonald's coffee lady didn't exaggerate. Mrs. Liebeck was not driving when her coffee spilled, nor was the car she was in moving. She was the passenger in a car that was stopped in the parking lot of the McDonald's where she bought the coffee. She had the cup between her knees while removing the lid to add cream and sugar when the cup tipped over and spilled the entire contents on her lap. The coffee was not just hot, but dangerously hot. McDonald's corporate policy was to serve it at a temperature that could cause serious burns in seconds. Mrs. Liebeck's injuries were far from frivolous. She was wearing sweatpants that absorbed the coffee and kept it against her skin. She suffered third-degree burns, the most serious kind, and required skin grafts on her inner thighs and elsewhere. Liebig's case was far from an isolated event. McDonald's had received more than 700 previous reports of injury from its coffee, including reports of third-degree burns, and had paid settlements in some cases. Mrs. Liebig offered to settle the case for $20,000 to cover her medical expenses and lost income, but McDonald's never offered more than $800, so the case went to trial. The jury found Mrs. Liebig to be partially at fault for her injuries, reducing the compensation for her injuries accordingly, but the jury's punitive damages award made headlines. Upset by McDonald's unwillingness to correct a policy despite hundreds of people suffering injuries, they awarded Liebig the equivalent of 2 days' worth of revenue from coffee sales for the restaurant chain. That wasn't, however, the end of it. The original punitive damage award was ultimately reduced by more than 80% by the judge, and, to avoid what likely would have been years of appeals, Mrs. Liebig and McDonald's later reached a confidential settlement. McDonald's ran an incredibly effective campaign highlighting some ridiculous lawsuits people had filed over the years to try and debunk hers as the same. The brutality of her injuries alone is unbelievable. Your article is modest. The coffee melted her vagina. There is no specific Plymouth Rock, but there is an enshrined rock that someone basically picked out and people pilgrimage to. Most boring landmark ever. And it's been replaced more than once from what I remember. Curing cancer isn't going to be a single eureka moment and bam, cancer is gone forever. There are tons of different types of cancers, with different genetics and epigenetics playing into how they develop. There seem to be people out there who think Big Pharma, trademark sign, is sitting on some magical cure that they're holding out on because they want to sell treatments. To even suggest that there's one catch-all cure is so reductive of what cancer is. It's not really one disease. It's tons of different ailments with different symptoms that happen to share some commonalities in the way the cells divide and spread. Ducking, thank you. The amount of people I've just wanted to slap in the back of the head for saying I know they have a cure gives me nightmares. Guy I knew was always really quiet, and that included real life and social media. Just a very calm, mild person. One day, a mutual friend of ours from college posted a meme image basically implying there was a cure, but Big Pharma was keeping it down because they were making so much money on treatment. Kid commented if the rich really had some secret cure for cancer, the rich wouldn't still be dying from cancer like the rest of us. You really think Steve Jobs and other elite members of society are taking one for the team just so this ducking long con can't continue? This was the first time he had posted to social media in months. Guess he had just finally reached a breaking point. Haha. Flushable wipes aren't flushable. Toilet paper breaks down easy in water. But you ever seen a baby wipe rip up? Those things just end up clogging pipes and ruining the sewers. Hell, New York, sorry, London, my bad, found a huge mass of those things, along with a bunch of other junk, the size of a bus in the sewers thanks to those wipes. If I recall correctly, makers of those wipes are allowed to call them flushable if they can get around the U-bend and out of the pipes of your home. Once they're in the sewer, what happens to them isn't considered a problem as far as the labeling is concerned, which leads to a lot of people thinking they're fine to flush, or at least those that care about those sorts of things in the first place. It's like call a poisonous mushroom edible just because it can pass through the esophagus. I haven't met too many people who believe this. I do live in New England though, but nobody was burned at the stake during the Salem witch trials. 19 people were hung, and one man was pressed to death, but nobody was burned. More weight. Giles Corey was straight gangster. Bettas and goldfish can't healthily live in a bowl. Edit. To clarify, I'm saying don't put any fish in a bowl. The misconception is that it's okay, but it's not. Betta Siamese fighting fish care sheet, goldfish care sheet. To add to that, the reason the myth started that bettas can live in, or even prefer, small containers was because, unlike other fish, they can breathe from the surface and live in unoxygenated water. This helps them survive in the wild in small bodies of water during severe droughts. What that myth doesn't acknowledge is that 1. Filters do more than just oxygenate water. They cycle the tank so ammonia doesn't build up and cause burns or increase the risk of fungal infections. And 2. They don't live their whole lives during a drought. They usually live in vast rice paddies and may never see a drought in their lifetime. Living in a tiny container smaller than a puddle is like living their whole lives on survival mode. Also, bettas are tropical and need heaters, and for the water to stay at a stable temperature, which is kind of hard to do under 5 gallons. I got a free betta and spent so much money on his habitat. He freaking loved the bubbles. They also need plants. They need to be able to hide. Abraham Lincoln's famous log cabin was not built during his lifetime. This was built 30 years after his death by entrepreneur Alfred Dennett. Most psychological disorders don't present like the media would lead you to believe. See also, what therapy looks like. ETA. Holy crap. Gold. I had a quick break in my day to finally hop on Reddit and was not expecting this response. You'll make this severely overworked community mental health therapist so glad we're talking more about the realities of therapy and various disorders. I'm planning on getting back on when I'm done with work to reply to some comments, answer some questions. Bipolar disorder equals one day you're batshit crazy off the walls and the next day you're sobbing and eating ice cream alone in bed. In actuality, in most cases, symptoms only get severe if left untreated for a long time. Also, most experience episodes for months, mania, or years. Depression, so they wouldn't go from mania to depression that quickly, with cyclothymic disorder the less common, rapid cycling bipolar being the exception. Mania isn't always super happy and productive either. I get edgy and anxious. Everything pisses me off. I just want to consume ducking everything. Drugs, sex, spending, you name it. But I never feel good while it happens. With good meds though, now I'm just in a bad mood for like a month or two, around twice a year. Edit. For those asking about my medication, I take oxcarbazepine 450 mgs twice a day. Brand name is Trileptal. It's an anti-epileptic drug with secondary traits as an antipsychotic and mood stabilizer. Used to take a Bipapri and Abilify combo that ducked with me in weird ways. Ever since dropping antidepressants things have been much better. Also, for the record, I have to keep a pretty regular routine and have months where I refuse myself any big decisions. But not being out of hand all the time helps with that. Giving a cat milk is a very bad idea. Most cats are lactose intolerant and giving them milk will cause stomach problems. We could always force evolution by only giving them milk. There is no such thing as aircraft grade aluminum, it's just a marketing scam. We use many different grades and tempers depending on the application. Oh, and I suppose the Corinthian leather in my old Chrysler wasn't from Corinth either? Yep, right. Did you know that Aston Martin only source leather for their cars from cows that don't live in a field surrounded by barbed wire? Because that could leave imperfections in the leather. That one side of your brain controls logic and calculations etc, while the other music, art and language. And you don't just use 5% of your brain. The myth is 10%. That few people lived past their 30s in the Middle Ages or some other ancient era. This misconception arises because of an automatic and incorrect assumption people make when they hear the statistic the average life expectancy was 35 in the Middle Ages. In reality, there have always been lots of people who lived to 70 plus years old in all societies. The difference was that in the Middle Ages there were many childhood diseases that caused a much higher childhood mortality rate, which skews the numbers much lower. If you survived childhood, there was a very good chance you would make it into your 60s plus. I think there's another misconception about this misconception that people regularly live just as long as they do today. We still live longer than in the past, but not as extreme as it seems when looking at an average. Not quite true. 50s, 60s was probably normal. 70 plus would have been very rare. This would have been even more pronounced in the poor compared to the wealthy. The teddy bear was named for a bear that Theodore Roosevelt spared on a hunting trip. However, he didn't exactly spare it, and it wasn't exactly out of mercy. There was a professional trapper slash tracker slash hunter dude with him whose job was to find a bear for him to kill. However, the bear he found was so pathetic looking that Roosevelt just didn't think it worth his effort. The trapper dude just cut its neck open instead. And Teddy Roosevelt hated being called Teddy. Yep, he prefers Daddy. The myth: Napoleon was really short. The truth: he was actually average height, or even a little bit above average height. How did it come about? The archaic French measurement used stated he was around 5 feet 3. when in actuality that translates to about 5 feet 7 in today's measurements, which was average for the time. There are several factors that combine to create this myth. Discrepancy between the French pied and English foot, the former being about 3-5% larger. He was typically surrounded by members of the old guard, which at a minimum height requirement of nearly 6 feet. He was nicknamed Le Petit Caporal in reference to his habit of mingling with common soldiers, not his physical size. The English thought it was funny. This is probably the most significant one. Also, his lifeguards had to be over 6 feet, so he was always around people much taller than him. You don't have OCD because you like things organized or clean. OCD is horrible and debilitating, and it's a lot less fun than feeling satisfied when things are organized. Edit. Wowie. Silver. Thanks guys. I'm glad to see this resonate with people. I was diagnosed last year and it made so many things make sense in my life. Treatment was good, but I still have to manage it. Hope you all get help if you need it. Red heart. Additionally, you don't have bipolar disorder because you occasionally are moody. You don't have depression because sometimes you're a little sad. You don't have anxiety because you get stressed during normal, stressful periods. etc. Well said. To add to this, you don't have ADHD because you occasionally lose focus, forget things, get a surge of energy or space out, etc. And it's false that everyone has a little ADHD. Edit. I apologize if this comes across as gatekeeping. I meant this as, you don't necessarily have ADHD simply because you occasionally experience those things. The symptoms of ADHD are all normal behaviors if only occasional. The disorder is when they are severe enough to cause ongoing problems in more than one area of your life. That is not to say you do not have it. Mental disorders can affect everyone differently. Here is information on ADHD in adults. Here is information on ADHD in women, which may present differently than in men. Here is information on ADHD in children. Here is information on ADHD in girls, which may present differently than in boys. Consult with a doctor if you think you maybe have ADHD, or if you're having a hard time with daily life in general. They are the professionals. ADHD does still carry a stigma, however, so don't be afraid to seek a second opinion from a doctor. I didn't actually shit my pants in 4th grade. Garrett put a barbecue sauce packet in my chair before I sat down. That's not what I heard. I'm so sick of your shit, Garrett. Type 1 diabetes is never ever caused by diet or lifestyle things. Like never, not ever. What if my lifestyle choice in replacing my pancreas and ducking with my immune system? Ha, what now, smarty pants? A proposal to make German the official language of the United States of America was defeated in Congress by 1 vote. It's easily debunked by common sense. Seriously, why would they do this? And congressional records. The myth likely comes from the fact that a proposal to adjourn and discuss at a later time a petition to have laws translated to German for German-speaking residents was defeated by 1 vote. Autism is a genetic disorder. Genetic disorders are created within us before we are born. While our DNA is still being made up, vaccines don't change our genetics. Therefore, vaccines don't cause autism. Edit. Changed genetic code to DNA for correctness. Mine's about autism too, but from a much different angle. Autism doesn't grant superpowers. Ever since Rain Man, everyone assumes that autistic people all have some sort of super intelligence or hyper concentration. Sure, there's autistic people who do have extraordinary abilities, but they are extremely rare. My cousin is autistic, but his only superpower is keeping up with like 20 ongoing anime series at once. But then again, I used to do that too, and I'm not autistic, as far as I know. The black box flight recorder on an aircraft is orange, not black. Was this always so? Like, of course it makes sense that it's a bright color so it's easier to find, but that raises the question of where the term came from. Edit. Raises. Sorry English angels. I was tired. Edit 2. I have more than enough duplicate answers to this question now. Thanks. In engineering, a black box is a standard solution to something which can be integrated into a larger system. Despite the designer not knowing what the interiors of that box are, I would guess that these things were designed by separate companies to the plane manufacturers and then sold to them as black boxes. It probably doesn't have anything to do with color. The red liquid from a properly cooked steak is not blood. Don't worry. It's a piece of a dead body. Why do people get grossed out by blood on it? Oh, interesting. What is it? Not knowing whether people are posting the misconception or the explanation against the misconception. Type 1 diabetics can't eat sugar. Yes, we can. We can eat whatever we want, as long as we take insulin for it. Edit. Thanks for the silver. To clarify a couple points being argued against this, we can eat whatever we want, when our BG is appropriate. For example, I'm not gonna eat 12 bags of Skittles when I'm at 300. Insulin is something we use to manage it, not a complete workaround. No matter what we try, BG levels will never stay perfect. Try to have a little empathy for us. It's a constant chore we have to think about all the time. Edit number 2. Holy shit, thanks for the gold. Autographs will be signed for $30. Please correct me if I'm wrong on this, as I'm uneducated in it. Type 1 diabetes is a lack of the ability to produce insulin. Type 2 diabetes is where the body has developed a resistance to its own insulin as a result of having to pump it out on extremely frequent occasion. Is this correct? Yes. George Washington Carver didn't invent peanut butter. Sorry, Black History Month. It was a white Canadian bloke 50 years prior. Still, Carver did a lot of cool stuff with peanut cultivation. To add to this, Carver's work was so much more complex than merely inventing peanut butter. As great as peanut butter is, he worked hard to create and promote products and food recipes that involved peanuts and sweet potatoes because 1. Those were cheap, hence more readily available to poor farmers, and 2. They were better for the soil, which had been stripped of its nutrients in his home area by cotton farming. He wasn't just some guy who put peanuts on food. He was a professor, an agricultural scientist, and an environmentalist. But even better, it was a black slave who taught Jack Daniels how to make whiskey. Depressed people don't feel sad. The most common feelings when depressed are numbness, nothingness, and extreme boredom. Things that used to feel fun and exciting are now just boring. The public misconception that depression means feeling sad all the time pisses me off, because people spend months or years wondering what's wrong with them instead of seeking professional help. Edit. To answer some questions, perhaps I went a little extreme with saying that depressed people don't feel sad. It's just not the primary feeling of depression. Depression presents differently in different people. Depression is a set of symptoms, not a singular diagnosis. I've heard scientists believe there are at least 5 different causes, or different types, of depression. Some people might feel sad almost none of the time. Others might feel sad some of the time, and others might feel sad all the time. Though, chances are they already have a diagnosis. In my experience, depression brings with it a wide variety of secondary feelings. Anger and frustration are common, along with feelings of worthlessness and self-doubt. As I said earlier, sadness and crying happens from time to time. Depression often coexists with anxiety, so you might get fear, dread, and avoidance. It's totally possible to experience happiness and joy while depressed. You can totally laugh at good jokes. Not everyone who is depressed is suicidal. Do you suspect you might be depressed? Don't ask the internet for a diagnosis. Please seek professional help. In most countries, your GP, aka family doctor, is usually the correct entry point for an initial diagnosis and connecting to the right professionals. Edit 2. This has been brought up a few times. If your doctor isn't helping, you can shop around and ask for second or third opinions, or bypass the doctor and go directly to a counselor, therapist, or psychologist. Don't forget anger. People always sweep that one under the rug. That Texas retains the right to secede back to the Republic of Texas whenever it wishes. Don't they have the exclusive right to split themselves into multiple states without congressional approval, though? May they were given that right when they joined the Union, but not when they came back again after leaving to join the CSA, or maybe they never actually legally left the Union. Since the union didn't acknowledge the succession as legitimate and so retain the right, and just maybe the US federal government doesn't have a good record of letting people keep the rights they were granted by treaty. In other words, may I be. My room and car being a mess doesn't prove I don't have OCD. In fact, if I didn't have it, it'd be easier to get things like cleaning done. Explaining the difference between OCD and OCPD is maddening. Plenty of patients with OCD hoard and they act far differently than monk. Mercy for the silver. And I corrected my typo. I'm colorblind, but it's not all black and white. I see colors. Just not like you do. I'm black and white colorblind. Can you see better at night than most? Babies placed for adoption at birth in the US do not go into foster care. There's a waiting list at least 36 people long for each newborn placed for adoption. That's why it's expensive. That's why people go overseas to adopt. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.